And she comes up and she goes, well, it's not very good. I said, well, what's not very good? She said, 900. She said, 910. I went, $910. She goes, no, $9.10.
You're just going to love this bit of news that Jesse the Body Ventura on September 11th defeats Titan Sports and Court over unpaid videotape royalties, where he was told nobody received royalties unless it was a best of Roddy Piper or Jim Duggan or Hulk Hogan videotape. It was later revealed that Hogan, Mr. T, and others did in fact receive videotape royalties from tapes other than best ofs and so forth. And because the WWF lied to Ventura's agent Barry Bloom, Jesse's pre-existing agreement with the WWF was null and void. Jesse took home $809,000 plus all legal fees and court costs. So he took over $1 million from Titan, all told.
Yeah, hurrah, right? I mean, it's, and that, take my feelings about Vince and having worked for that company away from this. I am a firm believer, if you and I can prove it in practice, when we did hardcore homecoming, Steve and Mike O'Neill, Cody Michaels, I'm trying to remember Kevin's last name. Kevin from the videotape company. Again, all these names are so bad with anymore, but chair shots, my excuse. But there were 5 of us. Now, this was an ECW reunion show of sorts. None of these guys had anything to do with ECW. So I could have sat down at that table and said, hey, I'm taking 90%. You guys all get 2.5%. What are they going to say? No. I mean, but I'm a firm believer that if you and I are doing equal work, that we should all make the equal share of it, right? And so divvy that out. So that said, like into the business and how that carted over, like in something with Jesse's case, I can assure you the royalties that are sent out are so minuscule that it doesn't even warrant the gas to run to the bank to cash the check, honestly. And having never been paid a dime for any of my royalties from WWF, from ECW, the footage that they've used and all the rest of that. Now, I've always maintained that if Vince would make, let's just round this off, if Vince makes $1,000 with Shane Douglas's name and face, I'm not suggesting that I should make $999 of it, but shouldn't I make $1 of it? $10 of it, $100 of it. Like, what's the fair amount that we've been talking about there? And there's this long and laborious and totally unrealistic clause in the contract that says you have the right to audit the company anytime you want, up to one time a year. Well, to do a audit on the company the size of the WWF, WWE now, would be, I'm guessing, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to like go through this forensically and figure out like where this money all went and everything. So it's a completely unrealistic clause in the contract. And so that when somebody like Jesse struck back and was able to prove, or his agent struck back and was able to reach in and say, hey guy, you've made a boatload of money with us and we want this money back. I say kudos, because it's not like he's going and saying, hey, I heard you made $1 million last year with Brett. I'd like to have 1,000 of that or 100,000 of that. This is money made from his face and likeness that was sold specifically and only because it was Jesse the Body Ventura and Vince lining his pockets. I don't know how that agreement has worked out today, but in every contract I ever had with WCW or WWF, the royalties were a joke to be made of. WCW gave you, like when my first with them was a third to Johnny, a third to me, and a third to the company. Sounds fair, right? It sounds equitable. You're getting the same as each of us. The problem with that was it was excluding all costs. So, boy, to put out a $10 t-shirt, you wouldn't believe the cost that the company had to put out a $10 t-shirt, like $9.37 or something. And so you're splitting up basically like 50, 60 cents per shirt. So each of us is getting 17 cents per shirt or some, crazy thing like that. That's just not even worth your time to even sign one, let alone worrying about it. And that plays out to the story that I'm sure some of the fans out there have heard me say when we were doing they used to have the Great American Bash Tour all summer. And Johnny and I are sent every day with like Brad Armstrong and Pillman and Zink and a bunch of us like that, the younger guys, to these shows in the afternoon, and we'd go and we'd have a meet and greet, and they would sell tons of merchandise. Well, Johnny and I would sit there and sign. I mean, they had bracelets and sunglasses and hats and bandanas and T-shirts and rip-away shorts, and these things are coming through. We're signing hundreds of these things a day, right? Like we're selling a boatload. And each one of these, okay, these shorts are say $15, $5, $5, and put that through a single day, let alone the entire like 75 days of the tour. And my mother was at home getting my checks at the time because I wasn't married or dating, and every couple of weeks, anything on the no. Finally, one day she called and she said, "Hey, you got 2 checks today. You got a green one and a yellow one, different envelopes." I thought it must be the merch. Open it up. I'm thinking in my head like $20,000-$30,000. And she comes up and she goes, "Well, it's not very good." I said, "Well, what's not very good?" She said, 900. She said, 910. I went, $910. She goes, "No, $9.10. I about had a stroke. I was going to kill somebody. And, so the companies, I mean, shame on them. Again, like it's a mutual thing. If you're going to take the talent that you think I have, and you're going to parlay that out there in a videotape and T-shirts, merchandise, whatever, and then you make some chunk of money on that. Some people might say 1%, some might say 99%, but there's got to be a point in there that's considered industry averages and like what is, like somebody like the Undertaker, for instance. You put something out of his and it's going to sell a gazillion, of it. And I maintain that any talent, if Butch Patrick or played Eddie Munster on the Munsters, is still getting residual checks today from the Munsters, and fairly decent ones. I would imagine that Shane Douglas and Jesse Ventura and all the other people I've mentioned, everybody that's ever been in those positions, should get their fair share of that money, not minus costs and all the rest of this stuff. So anyway, kudos to Jesse. Fantastic.
Hey, we could get into a whole thing about the WWE network and how there's no DVDs anymore and how nobody gets residuals, even though they have like 1 million or so subscribers every year, but we're not. So we'll leave that for another day, but that's another conversation. Oh.
Well, there is, again, one of the clauses of the contract was that something along the lines of, I'll put it in layman's terms. I agree that videotapes and this and this and this and that, books and magazines and everything else, and then quote, any other technology now in existence or created in the future. Okay, well, what human being sitting here today can say, okay, in 10 years, this is where cell phones will be, or this is where computers will be, or my guess is we'll be at some point beaming around like Star Trek, right? You want to go to New York? There you go. You're in New York. It's impossible for any human being sitting here today to say, I'm going to give up this right 20, 30 years down or longer down the road. And you can just make as much money as you want with it. It doesn't matter if you're using my footage and my likeness that I worked hard to get over. I don't know if it's ever been tested in court. I guess there's probably some kind of history to that is probably not related to wrestling. But I'd be curious to dig into that and find out like what the legalities are behind that. Because again, like if Vince is going to take the time to, or whoever, take the time to make this stuff, produce this stuff, advertise it, sell it, and everything, of course they're deserving of their share. But like, what is the fair share to me or to the talent that's behind? The only reason somebody buying that, nobody walks up and says, "Man, I hate Jesse Ventura, but you know what? I'm going to buy this because Vince is putting it out." It's because of Jesse Ventura. So it's like I said, I'm sure we'll dabble on this a lot in the future because this is going to be one of those things that recurringly comes up.